Welcome to UX203 UI/UX for Web Applications. This course is about how great digital products are designed from the ground up. Not just how they look, but how they work, how they feel, and why some products keep users coming back while others lose them in seconds. This first lecture asks the most fundamental question: what actually is UI/UX, and why should everyone building software care about the answer? Here's where we're headed across 9 lectures. We start today by grounding the core terminology, UI versus UX, and how they relate. From there we move into user research, information architecture, wireframing and prototyping, visual hierarchy, typography and color, interaction design, accessibility, and finally tie it all together in a capstone session. Each lecture builds on the last, so let's start at the very beginning. Let's open with numbers that should make every product team uncomfortable. 88%. That's the share of first-time users who say they will not return after a single bad experience. You rarely get a second chance to make a first impression, and in digital products that impression is formed in seconds. Now the flip side. The Nielsen-Norman Group, the most cited UX research firm in the world, calculates the return on investment for UX at 100 to 1. Every dollar invested in user experience design returns 100. That is not a soft, unquantifiable benefit. It is a financial multiplier backed by decades of evidence. And here is the brutal reality behind both of those numbers. On average, a new visitor spends just 15 seconds on a web page before deciding whether to stay or leave. Your UI has to earn attention before a single word is read. Let's be precise about the terminology, because conflating these two things causes real damage to product quality. UI user interface is the visual and interactive layer. Buttons, color palette, typography, layout, spacing. It is what you see and touch on screen. UX user experience is broader. It is the complete journey a person takes. Finding the product, forming a first impression, navigating to a goal, encountering friction, completing a task, and deciding whether to return. It is what you feel. The critical insight: you can have a beautiful UI and still deliver terrible UX. If the flow does not make sense, if users cannot find what they need, if error messages are cryptic, the polish on the surface will not save you. Conversely, great UX always demands considered UI. The two are intertwined, but they are not the same thing. In practice, UI and UX roles frequently overlap, and the tooling is identical. Figma, Sketch, Adobe XD are all used by both practitioners. The distinction is more about focus than software. On a small team, one person wears both hats. You might run a user interview on Monday, synthesize findings on Tuesday, and produce high-fidelity mockups by Thursday. That is entirely normal and often an advantage. Fewer handoffs means faster iteration. On larger teams, specialists own each layer. A UX researcher conducts the interviews and maps the findings. A product designer translates those into flows and wireframes. A UI designer builds the visual language. Clear ownership prevents things falling through the cracks. And there is always a bridge between design and code. Figma's Dev Mode, Zeppelin, and Storybook ensure that what was designed is what gets built, with exact measurements, design tokens, and exportable assets in one place. The handoff is part of the design process, not an afterthought. The design process is not a straight line, it is a loop. Let's walk through each step. Everything begins with research. Before a single wireframe is drawn, you need to understand who your users are, what context they operate in, and what problems they are trying to solve. Skip this step and you are not designing, you are guessing. Once you understand the problem, you structure a solution. Wireframes are boxes and arrows. They define information hierarchy and user flow with no visual styling. Structure before polish, always. Then you make it clickable. A prototype does not need to be perfect. It needs to be good enough to test, good enough to put in front of a real person and generate real feedback. Put it in front of real users and observe. Not ask. Observe. Where do they hesitate? Where do they click the wrong thing? Where do they abandon? Every hesitation is a data point. Then improve from evidence, not from opinion. Update the design based on what you observed and start the loop again. This cycle never fully stops. Every shipped version feeds the next round of research. This is not about aesthetics, it is about money. Companies that invest seriously in UX report conversion rate improvements of up to 400%. That is not a marginal gain. That is the difference between a product that barely pays its server bills and one that scales to millions of users. Here is a statistic that should haunt every e-commerce team. 70% of shopping carts are abandoned before checkout. The leading cause is not price. It is poor UX. An unexpected form field, a confusing error message, a broken back button. Each one costs measurable, attributable revenue. And at an organizational level, companies that reach UX maturity, where design is embedded in the product process rather than bolted on at the end, grow 5 times faster than their peers. UX is not a department. It is a competitive strategy. Here is a story that became a product industry legend. When Airbnb was struggling to gain traction in 2009, the co-founders flew to New York, knocked on doors of their hosts, and paid a professional photographer to reshoot the property listings. Bookings doubled overnight. They did not fix the code. They did not add a feature. They fixed the user experience of trusting a stranger's home. The insight is profound. Great UX is often not a technology problem. It is a human empathy problem. Design is a team sport. The best products are built when developers, product managers, and designers are in the room together from day one. Not when design is tossed over a wall to be implemented. Shared ownership from the start means fewer surprises at the end. Whiteboard sessions at the beginning of a feature cycle do more to align a team than weeks of documentation. When everyone draws the system together, flows, edge cases, error states, everyone understands it and everyone owns it. And modern handoff tools eliminate that it looks different in code problem. Figma's dev mode surfaces exact measurements, spacing tokens, and component properties directly alongside the design. There is no longer a good excuse for a shipped component to drift from its specification. Garrett's Elements of User Experience model describes any digital product as 4 stacked layers, and every layer must be sound before the one above it can work. The foundation is strategy. User needs and business goals must genuinely align here. A product that serves users brilliantly but generates no revenue will not survive. A product that extracts revenue but delivers no real value will not scale. Strategy is where those two imperatives must meet. Scope defines which features and which content actually serve that strategy. This is where the product roadmap lives. Not every feature request belongs here. Scope is the filter that keeps products coherent and prevents them from becoming everything to everyone. Structure is the information architecture and interaction flows. How is the product organized? How does a user navigate from intent to outcome? Structure makes the scope navigable. And finally, the surface layer, the visual design, interaction details, and microcopy that users actually touch. This is the layer most non-designers call the design. But it only works when the 3 layers beneath it are already solid. Great UX compounds over time. Think of it as a flywheel. You deliver a great experience, user satisfaction rises. Satisfied users return and refer new users. That retention and referral drives revenue. Revenue funds further investment in design and engineering. That investment produces an even better product, which creates even more satisfied users. The wheel accelerates. Teams that internalize this cycle treat UX as infrastructure, as foundational as the database or the API. Because it is. Product teams exist in one of 2 modes at any given time. Discovering what to build, or building what they have discovered. The failure mode that costs the most money is spending 90% of your time building and 10% discovering, and then learning after 6 months of engineering that you built the wrong thing. 1 week of user research is infinitely cheaper than 1 sprint of misdirected build. Discover first. Build second. Before any feature ships, run through this checklist. Have you designed every state? Hover, focus, active, error, empty, loading. If any state is undesigned, the feature is unfinished. Every missing state is a user-facing failure waiting to happen. Has at least one real user tested the primary flow end-to-end? Not a stakeholder. Not a colleague who knows the product. A genuine target user, completing a realistic task with minimal guidance. Does this feature map directly to a stated user need or a stated business goal? If you cannot clearly articulate the answer, stop and answer it before you ship. Has contrast been verified? Has someone navigated the full flow using only a keyboard? These are not optional, they are baseline quality standards. Are all specs, assets, and annotations complete? accurate, and accessible to the engineering team in the design tool. No verbal agreements. No, we'll figure it out in code. UI is the surface layer: buttons, colors, type, layout. UX is the entire journey, from discovery through task completion to return visit. They are related but not interchangeable. Good UX measurably lifts conversion, retention, and trust. This is not an aesthetic judgment. It is a business metric, supported by decades of evidence. Design is a loop. Research, wireframe, prototype, test, iterate. The loop never fully stops. Every shipped product is the input to the next cycle of learning. Let's close with 3 questions to sit with. Where in your current product does the UX feel weakest? And have you validated that instinct by watching a real user struggle with it? Have you ever shipped a feature that users did not actually want? How did you discover that, and how long did it take? And finally, what would just one user interview, one conversation, change about your current roadmap? Take those questions into the next lecture on user research. See you there.